gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this morning, Minister Tan Kim Jong and honored guests. It is traditional for the President to go through some of the statistics of the meeting, and I want to run through that because it's very clear to me now that since this meeting was first convened in 1995 in Japan, after the 7 ISOLs in Singapore in 1993, that was headed by Prof. Robert Fo, who's in the front row here, that we've grown. And we've grown dramatically over the last few years. And we began perhaps with a number closer to about 120, 180. Then it grew, we had the 350 range. But look at where we are today. So the total number of registrants for this meeting was 435. It's unprecedented. For the record, I actually had to put in. For the record, I had to put in 3 more rows of chairs. If you missed that this morning. And the papers accepted for presentation was 267. And if we go by what was presented this morning, I believe the APM-STS has come of age. I believe we can begin to lead some of the thought processes that are happening in musculoskeletal oncology. And I'm really, really proud that we're beginning to see that here. You can see the countries that are represented here. This is home-based, and you know that Singapore is not a big country, but for us to put this number of registrants is just amazing for me to see. Malaysia has really grown. Japan has always been a strong supporter. But look where we are on the back end of this list. We're beginning to see people from the Middle East. Ukraine, that's not a typo. We actually are seeing people from the Ukraine. There's Sweden, there's Sudan, there's Jordan. You saw Thomas Shade's talk this morning about civil war and how that's affecting musculoskeletal oncology. We're bringing essentially to the table thought processes that just never were there before. And I'm so happy that this seems to be the format for that kind of thing. But enough of the meeting. I need to put on record a word of thanks to some people. And this is going to be a very personal journey for me. It's basically going to be my life through musculoskeletal oncology and the people who have touched my life and in the process resulted in this meeting. First up, Prof. P. Balasubramaniam. He couldn't be here this morning. He said he would, but he wasn't able to make it. And he's been a great teacher. Let me tell you, 30 years ago, I was a medical student and I was sitting in his class. And I'm not sure if the newer generation even knows this book. It's called Aptly. And there's this page in Aptly which essentially shows the geographic representation of bone tumors. And based on that, you can make the diagnosis, as we all know, in 80% of cases. And that for me was just so cool. That for me said, I want to do this. And there's born, and in this country, certainly with my generation, and many of the people you see here, we train as general surgeons first. And at this examination, which I sat for, there was this gentleman, Prof. Hansaket, who's here. And he was actually one of my examiners, and he said, hey, Suresh, why don't you come over and do orthopedics? Unfortunately, he didn't have a position for me. But he had a really good friend. And that good friend was Prof. Lee Yin. And Prof. Tan essentially told Prof. Lee, look, this guy, he's not too bad, why don't you take him? And, the long story short, here I am. Prof. Lee stepped down as the head of the Department of the National University of Singapore, and Prof. K. Sakudanantam then stepped up. And he, for the large part of my life, became the de facto orthopedic father that I never had. And I was probably not worth the amount of trouble I caused him, but he was there for me and he kind of helped me out and arranged for my fellowships. And I've always said he was meant to be here, wasn't able to make it. And then, of course, there's Prof. Bessie Chacha, who was the former chief of orthopedics at National University of Singapore. And he had moved on now, and he's just recently in semi-retirement. He's always been the person who's been there as my moral compass, providing direction, you know, in essentially the soft skills that we take for granted, but you know, it's difficult to hold true to. And of course, last but not least, the man without whom this meeting might well have been delayed, and that's Prof. Robert Loh. He was the 7th president of the ISOLs, which initiated thought processes that ultimately culminated in the APMSTS. And so I have brought before you the group that essentially has resulted in this meeting. I would like to thank the members of the scientific committee. This year I took an unusual stance, and I essentially recruited a global scientific committee, and I have a very good reason for that. I believe we are maturing. Many of us will not see another cycle of APMSTSs that will be hosted in our home country, by which time we would have moved on. And so we need to begin thinking forward as to what renewal is for us. And so we need to begin to think about bringing in actively supporters of the annual scientific meeting. And for that reason, you will notice that the committee is quite global this year. I also would like to thank members of the Mount Elizabeth Hospital and Mount Elizabeth Medical Center for their support and sending their name to the event. Last but not least, I would like to thank the Singapore Orthopedic Association, in particular the 2 past presidents who were instrumental in providing for the wonderful lady known as Michelle, which all of you know, and she's probably the most famous person at this meeting, since everybody has had to make their applications through her. And all of that was provided for by the Singapore Orthopedic Association through the immediate past president, Dr. David Chua, and Dr. Kawan Litsoin, who was the past president. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Minister Gan Kim Yong to the stage to provide us with his address.